The quiet moments when life feels heavy often carry hidden questions. Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? Why does abundance slip away just as I begin to touch it? Why do I feel undeserving when opportunities arrive? These questions are not random. They are echoes of memories that settle deep within the nervous system, teaching the body to fear expansion and to associate prosperity with danger, rejection, or loss. The truth is that wealth is not only a matter of numbers or strategies, it is a matter of energy, memory, and the ability to welcome life without holding back. To reprogram the brain for prosperity, we must first honor the invisible wounds that taught us to contract whenever life offered more. When pain remains unresolved, the subconscious creates a shield. This shield tells us to stay small, to avoid risks, and to mistrust the very flow we long for. We say we want to manifest abundance, yet the body whispers not safe. This conflict creates a silent war between intention and physiology, between the conscious mind that dreams of a greater life and the inner child that trembles at the thought of stepping into it. Recognizing this war is the first step toward peace, and peace, paradoxically, is the foundation of prosperity. Only when the body feels safe can the mind relax into clarity, creativity, and the flow of opportunities. The path ahead is not about denying pain, but about transforming it into wisdom. Each scar holds a lesson, and each lesson becomes a stepping stone toward expansion. To move from survival into abundance, we must learn to see our stories not as prisons, but as passages. Through presence, rituals of gratitude, gentle reconditioning of thought, and deliberate action aligned with higher intention, we create new neural pathways, bridges between what once felt impossible and what now becomes natural. As you walk through this journey, remember, abundance does not arrive to complete you. It arises because you finally allowed yourself to be whole. This is the sacred art of reprogramming your brain for wealth, while healing the wounds that once kept you from receiving, giving, and multiplying life's gifts. There are moments in life when opportunity knocks, yet instead of stepping forward, something inside retreats. It is as though the nervous system has memorized that expansion means exposure, that more money means more responsibility, and that greater visibility means inevitable loss. This internal hesitation is not weakness, but a protective pattern that once made sense. Childhood experiences, cultural messages, or painful failures created a memory in the body. To grow is to suffer. That memory became a shield, one that today quietly limits how much abundance you allow yourself to receive. When we examine this shield closely, we see how it manifests in daily decisions. You undercharge for your work, even when you know its value. You hesitate to ask for help or negotiate fairly, because a subtle voice warns that standing tall will bring rejection. You delay finishing a project because completing it means facing feedback. Each of these choices appears rational in the moment, but underneath they reflect a nervous system trained to avoid risk by shrinking possibilities. The paradox is that the very safety you seek keeps prosperity at bay. The dissonance between desire and safety creates a hidden tug-of-war. Consciously, you want financial freedom, meaningful work, and opportunities to expand. Subconsciously, the body clings to the familiar discomfort of limitation because at least it knows how to survive there. This inner split is exhausting, leaving you drained without clear progress. Neuroscience describes it as cognitive dissonance, but on a spiritual level, it feels like being torn between destiny and fear. The result is that manifestation efforts feel blocked, not because the universe is silent, but because your system has not been trained to trust expansion. It is important to understand that the body does not sabotage out of cruelty. It seeks to protect. If once in your history, growth led to pain, then the body remembers pain as the price of abundance. The nervous system does not distinguish between past and present, it simply reacts. That is why affirmations alone often fail. You can repeat words of prosperity, but if the body still trembles at the thought of more, the signal is mixed and the manifestation weakens. Healing requires integrating both mind and body, teaching them together that it is safe to expand. The pathway to this integration begins with noticing the physical sensations that arise when you imagine wealth. Does your chest tighten? Does your breath shorten? Do your shoulders stiffen as if bracing for impact? These are not random reactions, but embodied memories surfacing. Instead of pushing them away, the practice is to meet them with presence. Breathe deeper. Name the sensation. Offer compassion to the part of you that once believed abundance was unsafe. Over time, these small acts of acknowledgement recondition the nervous system, showing it that today is not yesterday, and that growth no longer has to equal pain. One effective way to retrain the body is through incremental steps of expansion paired with rituals of safety. For example, if the thought of doubling your income feels overwhelming, begin by receiving slightly more than usual and consciously celebrating that moment. Create a simple ritual. Light a candle, breathe deeply, and say aloud, "It is safe to receive this." The nervous system learns through repetition, and each time you link prosperity with calmness instead of fear, you are rewriting the script. Gradually, the body begins to trust abundance rather than resist it. Consider abundance as a river. For some, the river flows powerfully, but past floods may have destroyed villages. Now, even when water is needed, the instinct is to build dams out of fear of another flood. These dams take the form of procrastination, underpricing, or avoiding opportunities. Yet prosperity is not meant to drown you. It is meant to nourish. The task is not to block the river, but to build channels that guide its flow safely. This is the art of regulation, opening gates little by little until the system learns to hold more without collapsing. This reconditioning also requires redefining what prosperity means beyond money. For some, abundance is tied to attention, love, or freedom, and if those were once painful, the same resistance appears. Expanding the definition allows you to practice receiving in many forms: compliments, kindness, time, and rest. Each moment of reception trains the nervous system to welcome instead of brace. As you embody the truth that receiving is safe, money begins to flow with greater ease, because the channel has been widened through practice in multiple dimensions. Over time, the shield that once blocked prosperity softens. You notice yourself saying yes more often, negotiating with calm confidence, finishing projects without dread, and welcoming new opportunities without the old fear. This shift is not instant, but gradual, like a dawn breaking. Light creeps across the horizon, and the body, once accustomed to darkness, begins to trust the morning. The more you align desire with safety, the less resistance remains, and the more fully you can step into the rhythm of receiving, giving, and multiplying resources. In truth, prosperity is less about chasing and more about allowing. It is a natural flow that arises when mind and body agree. It is safe to grow. Healing the distrust of abundance is the work of teaching yourself that life can expand without repeating old pain. When that lesson integrates, wealth ceases to be a distant dream and becomes the natural consequence of a body and mind finally at peace with the flow of more. There is a quiet power in realizing that the brain is not fixed, that the pathways of fear and scarcity etched into thought can be reshaped. Neuroplasticity is the innate ability of the mind to rewire itself, creating new connections and associations through repetition and intention. When we bring this truth into the realm of money and abundance, it becomes clear that scarcity is not destiny, but conditioning, and conditioning can be undone. Each thought of limitation carved a groove in the mind, but each new thought of possibility has the potential to form a new trail leading toward expansion. Consider how scarcity is often reinforced through constant worry about bills, repeated stories of failure, and inherited beliefs passed down like family heirlooms. These thoughts, repeated day after day, become the default circuit. Like a path in the forest walked 1,000 times, it becomes the easiest route for the mind to travel. Neuroplasticity teaches us that creating a new path requires two things: awareness and consistent practice. At first, walking this new trail feels uncomfortable, even unnatural, but over time the forest begins to change. Weeds clear, ground firms, and suddenly a new road is available, one where prosperity feels natural. This rewiring is not about forcing the mind into false positivity, but about offering it new evidence. Each time you acknowledge abundance, whether in the form of kindness, opportunity, or financial growth, you create a new association. The brain learns to pair the concept of more with feelings of safety, gratitude, and purpose. Slowly, the old wiring of fear loosens, and the nervous system shifts from survival to expansion. It is a gradual unfolding, like muscles remembering how to move after long stiffness, and the key lies in gentle daily repetition. Rituals play an essential role in this reprogramming. The brain thrives on rhythm and predictability, So when you anchor prosperity practices to consistent times and actions, you reinforce their permanence. For instance, beginning the day with a conscious declaration of intention creates a marker in the mind. Pairing this intention with deep breathing or mindful stillness signals to the body that it is safe, grounding the practice not just in thought, but in sensation. Over time, the ritual itself becomes a trigger for abundance, much like a familiar song that recalls joy without effort. Another element of neuroplasticity is the power of micro-shifts. Grand resolutions often overwhelm the nervous system, but small, repeatable actions gradually transform identity. Writing down one financial success at the end of each day may seem insignificant, yet in 30 days, the brain has been offered 30 new proofs of capacity. Each proof becomes a neuron firing in support of prosperity. When linked together, these firings form stronger circuits, and identity begins to shift from someone who struggles to someone who steadily expands. This is the hidden strength of consistent practice over dramatic effort. There is also a spiritual dimension to this science. When ancient teachings spoke of aligning thoughts with intention, they were pointing to the same principle now confirmed by research. What you focus on repeatedly becomes your lived reality. The brain cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and lived ones. Both form neural pathways. When you vividly imagine yourself negotiating with confidence, receiving payment with gratitude, or investing wisely, your brain rehearses those outcomes as if they were already true. Combined with aligned action, this rehearsal becomes prophecy fulfilled. Of course, resistance will arise. The old circuits do not disappear easily. They flare up when stress or uncertainty appears. In those moments, it is crucial to recognize that relapse into fear is not failure, but a signal that the old path still exists. Rather than fight it, acknowledge it, then gently guide yourself back to the new trail. Each redirection strengthens the new wiring. Over time, the old pathway grows faint from disuse, like a road slowly reclaimed by nature, until it no longer dominates your choices. Think of this process as building a bridge. At first, there are only scattered planks, unstable and uncertain. You step carefully, unsure if it will hold. With each repetition, more planks are laid, nails hammered, structure reinforced. Eventually, the bridge spans the entire gap, carrying you from scarcity to abundance with stability. The bridge is not built in a day, but with steady work it becomes reliable enough to trust, and once trusted, it becomes second nature to cross. Neuroplasticity applied to prosperity reminds us that wealth is not reserved for the lucky few, but available to anyone willing to retrain perception. It shows that fear of growth is not permanent, and that hesitation can be transformed into courage through practice. Above all, it proves that abundance is not something we chase, but something we condition ourselves to sustain. When thought, ritual, and action converge in consistent rhythm, the brain begins to see prosperity as the natural state rather than the exception. And in that shift, doors that once felt locked swing open with quiet ease. There is a hidden truth about prosperity that few dare to explore. The state of your nervous system determines the ceiling of your abundance. No matter how inspired your vision or how detailed your plan, if your body remains in a constant state of vigilance, every step toward expansion will feel like walking into danger. Survival mode does not coexist with creative flow. It narrows perception, accelerates the heartbeat, and convinces you to choose short-term safety over long-term growth. Understanding this is essential because prosperity is not simply a matter of strategy, it is a matter of physiology. When the nervous system is dysregulated, it interprets abundance as a threat. Receiving becomes uncomfortable, giving feels unsafe, and multiplying resources feels impossible. This happens because the body, once exposed to loss or betrayal, learned that expansion was dangerous. Even when life presents new opportunities, the old wiring translates them as risks. The mind may whisper, "This could change everything," but the body whispers back, "We might not survive this." The tension between these voices drains energy, causing hesitation, self-sabotage, and cycles of exhaustion. The journey of regulation begins with presence. To regulate is to remind the body that today is not yesterday, that the danger has passed, and that it can release its grip. Breath becomes the first bridge. By slowing the exhale, lengthening it beyond the inhale, you signal safety to the body. The heart rate shifts, the The mind clears, and in that silence, new choices become visible. What once felt overwhelming now feels possible, not because the external world has changed, but because the inner climate has calmed. Coherence is the next step. It is not a poetic metaphor, but a measurable state where breath, heart, and brain waves synchronize. In coherence, thoughts are sharper, emotions steadier, and decisions more balanced. This is the physiological soil where prosperity grows. Negotiations are calmer, creativity more fluid, and intuition sharper. Coherence does not guarantee outcomes, but it ensures that you are at your most receptive when opportunities arise. Without it, you may miss doors opening right before you, blinded by internal storms. Silence, often avoided, becomes a teacher in this process. The world tells us to work harder, make more noise, push against limits. Yet silence reveals the truth that urgency is not power but panic. In silence, the nervous system resets, the mind perceives more subtle signals, and the body relaxes into trust. 10 minutes of silence can unravel hours of anxiety, creating the clarity needed to choose wisely. Abundance flows toward clarity, and silence is one of its gateways. To embody this regulation, rituals can anchor the new state. Imagine a practice where 3 times a day, you pause to breathe in a rhythm of 4 counts in, 6 counts held, 8 counts out. Each cycle is a message. You are safe. Pair this with a quiet question, whispered not as demand, but as invitation. What is the next step that expands life? The answer may be simple: a phone call, a page written, a rest taken. But because it arises from regulation, it carries weight and direction. Prosperity responds not to frantic action, but to aligned steps. The image of prosperity as a river helps to grasp this. Too much control, and the river is dammed, starving the fields downstream. Too little control, and the river floods, destroying what it touches. Regulation is the art of guiding the flow, opening and closing gates with awareness. Receiving is one gate, giving another, multiplying a third. Each must be balanced. If you receive without giving, water stagnates. If you give without receiving, the river runs dry. If you multiply without balance, the banks erode. Regulation maintains harmony, so the river nourishes continuously. As you begin to regulate, subtle shifts appear. Conversations about money become calmer. Opportunities no longer trigger panic. Generosity feels natural instead of frightening. Sleep deepens, decisions sharpen, and energy stabilizes. Prosperity no longer feels like a chase, but like a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, pause. It is not the absence of challenge, but the presence of resilience, the capacity to remain centered even when life is unpredictable. This resilience is what allows abundance to stay, because it can now rest in a body that no longer treats it as danger. Ultimately, regulating the nervous system is an act of dignity. It is telling yourself that you deserve to live beyond survival, that safety is not only possible, but your natural state. From this ground, prosperity arises not as a sudden windfall, but as a steady current, trustworthy and sustaining. It is not about forcing abundance, but about becoming the kind of vessel that can hold it. And when the body trusts, the universe responds, because what you are able to sustain is what you are able to receive. Prosperity is not only measured in currency, but also in the stories we tell ourselves about what wealth represents. Deep within many people lies an invisible myth that abundance corrupts, that having more means losing connection, that wealth creates distance from what truly matters. This myth often forms in early experiences, perhaps watching someone misuse money, witnessing how success created envy, or feeling excluded by those who had more. Over time, the mind translates prosperity into separation, and the heart hesitates to embrace it fully. Until this myth is rewritten, abundance will always feel fragile, like something borrowed, rather than something natural. Language is a powerful tool in reshaping this inner story. The words you use create subtle shifts in identity. Saying, "I have to work," carries weight and pressure, while saying, "I choose to create," invokes agency and freedom. Repetition of disempowering language keeps the nervous system in a cycle of survival, while new expressions open space for empowerment. In spiritual traditions, words have always been considered sacred, capable of shaping reality. When you consciously choose language that reflects intention rather than fear, You are engaging in a form of daily alchemy. Each phrase becomes a seed, and in time, those seeds bloom into actions aligned with abundance. Still, imagination alone is not enough. Visualization has its place, but if it floats without grounding, it becomes a beautiful escape rather than a foundation for transformation. To align narrative with reality, there must be commitment. Commitment takes shape in the tangible. Plans written, goals tracked, agreements honored. When your vision is paired with concrete structures, imagination ceases to be fantasy and becomes a rehearsal for the life you are building. Prosperity then emerges not as a dream chased, but as a life constructed brick by brick, with intention and care. One way to anchor this narrative is through a conscious covenant with yourself. A covenant is more than a resolution, it is a living agreement between your present and future self. When you set a purpose for your wealth, whether to support your family, create beauty, or contribute to causes that matter, you link prosperity with meaning. This bond transforms wealth from something feared or hoarded into something alive with purpose. In this light, prosperity is no longer about accumulation, but about stewardship, about becoming a vessel through which resources flow in alignment with values. Symbolism enriches this covenant. Imagine a lighthouse turning slowly, casting its beam across the dark waters. The lighthouse does not rush or panic. It moves steadily, offering guidance to all who need it. Prosperity can function in the same way. When you build a life of consistency, your presence becomes a light for others. People come to trust your rhythm, knowing that you stand firm, steady, and reliable. Wealth then transcends personal gain. It becomes a collective blessing, illuminating paths beyond your own. Shifting narrative also means releasing the inherited belief that simplicity and scarcity equal purity. True purity does not require lack, it requires alignment. Wealth that flows through integrity enhances connection rather than severs it. When prosperity is aligned with purpose, it deepens bonds, nurtures generosity, and creates stability that shelters loved ones. The myth that having less makes me good dissolves when you experience how having more allows you to give more, protect more, and serve more. As these stories shift, you begin to see prosperity not as a mask you wear, but as a mirror of who you truly are. Every action becomes symbolic, a payment made with gratitude, a gift offered without fear, a boundary set with clarity. These acts weave a new narrative where money is not a source of shame or division, but a language of care and responsibility. The story changes from one of sacrifice to one of integration, where abundance supports the soul rather than distracts from it. This reimagining is not about pretending difficulties do not exist. It is about telling the truth in a new way. Painful experiences remain part of the story, but instead of defining the ending, they become the prologue that makes the unfolding richer. Your narrative of scarcity transforms into a narrative of resilience. Instead of, "I suffered because of money," it becomes, "I learned to honor myself and build a life where money serves love." In this shift, scars become symbols of strength, and meaning blossoms where fear once reigned. Ultimately, symbolism and narrative remind us that wealth is not neutral. It always carries meaning. The task is not to deny meaning, but to consciously choose it. When you infuse prosperity with values, align it with integrity, and anchor it in story, you step into a new dimension where abundance feels safe, purposeful, and enduring. The narrative you live becomes the legacy you leave, and that legacy whispers through generations that prosperity is not something to fear, but something to embody with dignity and grace. The journey we have taken together reveals a profound truth. Prosperity is not an external prize waiting at the end of relentless effort, but an inner state cultivated through alignment, safety, and meaning. We explored how unresolved pain wires the body to distrust abundance, how neuroplasticity offers us the capacity to reprogram thought patterns, how regulation of the nervous system restores clarity and resilience, and how symbolism and narrative breathe purpose into wealth. Each chapter has been a reminder that true prosperity is not simply about receiving more, but about becoming a vessel able to hold, honor, and multiply what flows through. When the body feels safe, the mind becomes creative. When language shifts, possibilities widen. When rituals of coherence are practiced, actions grow steady and sustainable. And when prosperity is connected to purpose, It ceases to be fragile and becomes a force that nourishes life beyond the self. Scarcity and fear may still whisper, but you now hold tools that allow you to listen with compassion without obeying. Healing is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of capacity, the knowledge that you can return to center again and again. This is the heart of reprogramming, transforming the old belief that abundance is dangerous into the embodied truth that prosperity is safe, meaningful, and aligned. Your story does not end with survival. It expands into stewardship, connection, and legacy. Wealth is no longer about what you have, but about who you become in the presence of more. And in that becoming, you honor both the scars that once held you back and the future that now opens before you. Prosperity is not the destination. It is the rhythm of a life lived in alignment with peace, purpose, and trust. Now I want to leave you with one question. What story will you choose to tell yourself about abundance from this moment forward? Every decision, every thought, and every ritual you embrace will add another line to that story, shaping not only your present, but the legacy you leave behind. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you can continue walking this journey of transformation with us. There are more teachings waiting for you, designed to deepen your connection with prosperity, purpose, and the universe itself. Do not stop here. On the screen, you will see the next video that continues this exploration, guiding you even further into practices and insights that can expand your life. Allow yourself to keep moving, to stay in the flow, and to discover the layers of wisdom that are waiting for you. Click, watch, and continue your journey. Your next step into abundance begins now.